Hey everyone, welcome back to Stories to D4. I'm here with Victoria for this week's Footnotes. If you haven't seen it already, this is the Footnotes for our most recent session where you all battled against the Bullet. But before we get into... Oh, what was that?
I was just yes. I'm just agreeing with you. That's what we did.
Before we get into talking about what I think was one of the more exciting combats we've had, we got some real quick announcements. First things first, if you're here, thank you so much. Go tell your friends. Go tell your parents. Honestly, tell people you don't like. We want them here too. We can mend the bridges. We have a Discord, which you can access in a link down below, and we'd love to have you come chat or bully Jake. It's always Jake.
It's always Jake.
It's always Jake. And we also want to thank our new subscriber, DMoon619. We're super happy to have you here, and thanks for supporting the channel. Now, on to this week's session.
You could have lowered it away from the mic a little.
I could have, but the delicious taste of true... I don't...
Not sponsored.
No, we don't have any sponsors. But, hey, if you know someone... So, for this week, you all had, I would say, you had a solid time. You chose a fight.
Yes.
This was, most of the encounters you've had so far, while they've been avoidable, they've been not... You weren't the initiators, but you decided, yes, we will continue this fight.
Yeah.
But in this case, it was a monster you all had discovered the last session.
Yeah, and I don't want to call the other fights mandatory fights. That
Sure.
seems like a bad, don't use the word mandatory. But they felt like fights that we should do, because we're protecting somebody. We've been attacked by somebody.
You saved a mother and her son.
Yeah, we're trying to prevent or protect something like that. And then this one was like, oh, want to go fight the big thing?
Go fight a big monster, and
Yeah.
sometimes you kind of have to. Okay.
Here we go.
Sometimes you kind of have to fight the big monster. Now, this is a creature you've faced in previous campaigns.
Yes.
I believe on by my recollection, on 2 occasions you've faced a bullet before.
Wasn't there like a lot of them at one of the fights, like 4
Yep.
or something?
So you have previously fought against... She's so silly. Now, the bullets you faced off before, same general, mostly the same creature as this one. This hard-shelled land shark,
Yeah.
angry burrowing creature.
Yes.
But in those 2 instances, you were higher level than where you are now in the campaign.
Because it was not just the 4; it was a bunch of people. And okay, she's trying to get into my lap.
She's very excited. Yeah, she can get up here. Coco likes to hop up and down.
Yeah.
Now,
She goes back.
I want to kind of use the higher level version of this fight you've done in the past off camera to kind of contrast to what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
You have faced off against bullets both underground and on the surface, but with access to that burrow ability, and that trips people up quite a bit.
Yeah. Okay. So I like to not get hit by things. That's my preference, really. It's why I've never played a tank.
I guess you really haven't. No.
I don't want to get hit by things. Getting hit is not fun. Oh wait, no. I think my cleric had an AC of 24. So.
Okay.
But.
There's a bunch of asterisks here. We'll get to those later.
Yeah, later. But fighting something that's got magic, right? It can shoot at you as long as it can see you, or can do area of effect things and maybe hit you with it. People on the ground, they can run at you and hit you with things, or they can fly up to you, whatever that is. But going underground where I can't see where you are,
breaking line of sight's really hard.
it's really hard because, yes, we are used to fighting around invisibility and hidden enemies and bushes or something. And that kind of is something that the brain is easy to pick up and understand, like, okay, that's what's going on here today. Something going underground and then just popping up wherever it wants to, not as easy.
And in this circumstance, you had... Now, it was 5-on-1. So this was... You all were fighting something that was individually considerably stronger than you, but you had the numbers advantage. It sort of had a terrain advantage with you, able to move around. There were some players getting in each other's way, and I kind of think using the terrain that way can be sort of fun, though a bit frustrating, of course.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is... I'm so visual. I'm a very visual player.
Right, and this was one... Now, we've got some... Oh, well, I've got some battle maps that I'm very excited to be bringing out very soon. But this was one of... we did another... It was a Theater of the Mind.
Yeah, and for me, knowing... On a regular battle map where you have like walls, either you've drawn them on with an expo marker or whatever, you've got a grid paper, or you've got terrain like walls and doors and tiles, that stuff, I can get that. I can see where I am, and I can say, okay, I can see how I couldn't see this other player. Whenever it's theater of the mind, it can get a little bit, as you're going through all these different turns, it can get a little bit hard to know where you are.
Sure.
And I would say I actually had a pretty great time in that last fight as well, because I did have to step away for a minute. But I knew what I wanted to do if something happened to me.
Yeah,
whatever the action would be, and then if it gets back to my turn while I'm gone. And that's the big thing about these kind of combats, especially when you're trying to play around and understand what's going on, knowing kind of what you want to do based off of what your party's been doing or what you think you should do next. Just like in general, coming up with what you want to do ahead of time. Sometimes it doesn't work.
You had such a solid grasp of what was going on that you left instructions with like if-then statements for Clella so that they could play for you if something came up while you had had to step away briefly for a phone call.
And I think that that's, for me as a player, the easiest way to deal with some of these encounters, because we haven't had, like, in our last campaign, there were like big war, conflict, large groups of people. In these kind of fights that are lower level, but it's a very difficult fight, I would say. I mean, we almost had people go completely down.
That first hit against Jake was
bad.
There were 2 11s and a 12 on the 4d12.
Yeah, and it's one of those, you've got to learn your character, learn what your character can do, and I have been missing things with my character, I will admit. There's been some things that I've missed, familiar being one of them, but in general, missing things with my character. And so going back and saying, okay, what can I do? If something hits me while I'm a wizard, I have shield, I will cast shield. I don't want to get killed by this thing. If it gets back to my turn, it seemed like magic missile was effective, I'll use magic missile. And so kind of having that idea ahead of time really helps in fights like that. But I wanted to say, that thing had legendary actions.
It did. So, I have a confession. My name is Matthew, and I'm a chronic homebrewer. I did have a bit of fun. I have found that, and this is a very common thing, anyone who's run 5th edition a fair amount has found that running solitary creatures versus players, especially if they don't have legendary actions, due to the way the action economy works, allows you to punch considerably higher above your CR. Now this was CR 5. This was an appropriate encounter to a degree. Your 5 player, 3rd level players were not terribly off from what would be expected for a challenging encounter.
Yeah, that was definitely one of those get the party completely drained kind of fight.
Right, and so that fight originally was intended to be something that, when you originally discovered the bullet, was going to happen after you had done other fights, and so it was going to be sort of this optional capstone that the players could choose to come back to. And I did have a roll behind the screens to determine if you lost your chance with the bullet.
Okay.
Because the bullet was basically, in the end, we'll talk about this in a bit, was a huge pile of walking gold for you.
Yeah.
It's very valuable. And so what I did for this, knowing... Ooh.
Get there.
Oh, I'm so excited. We're going to... Elstormio, we're going to talk about this just immediately after this. What I did for this bullet was I made 2 minor changes. The first was I used the maximize hit points. Every creature that in the monster manual, every creature you'll find in the various publications, Wizard of the Coast, and many homebrewers out there have created, will have a hit point and then hit points and the hit dice. And that determines the way that first number, the number you typically think of as the monster's health, is determined is based upon the average hit dice. And so looking at these monsters, what I tend to do when I've got either I want to make the challenge a little harder without doing too much, or I have a table with more than 4 players, is I'll often run where the hit points are higher, where they're the maximized. So instead of assuming that every D6 averages out to 3.5 hit points, I assume every D6 it rolled for its HP was 6. And so we used maximized hit points. In addition, I gave it a single legendary action. Now, to my knowledge, nearly all published creatures with legendary actions actually get 3 legendary actions or more in a very small number of circumstances. But this one had only a single. It was more to sort of introduce the concept and to amp up a okay creature. Now, to answer Elstormio's encounter, a question about the challenge rating. Challenge ratings get a lot of flack online, and I don't think all of it is deserved. It is not a perfect system, and it isn't something I would I use without double checking things. But I do find it can be a very useful starting point for what sort of monsters can I expect to run with these characters. And what I'll do from there is peek behind the screen. I'm a big math nerd. I like looking at, hey, okay, how many functionally attacks can this thing do? Does it have multi-attack? Does it have area of effect abilities that can affect multiple creatures? And if so, I can figure out roughly how much damage they do. And using that CR as a basis, I can add or subtract a weakling nearby. So maybe I'm wanting to use some bandit leader, and I'm thinking this is pretty strong, but the average damage output's a little low, so I'm adding a goon or two in the background.
Yeah.
But I often use challenge rating as a starting point, but not as it's never the final answer, but it is a good guideline for me. You've done some DMing. Now, I know you used some predefined stuff from Curse of Strahd.
Yeah.
You made your own encounters, too.
So, because I'm an unfair DM,
Okay.
in general, I was doing a very similar thing, not in the same spirit of necessarily balance, but with Curse of Strahd, I wanted it to... Obviously, there were some situations where you guys just womped on the enemies and it was over in 2 rounds.
Hey, womping is great.
But I wanted it to have more of that kind of like desperation feel, so I was maximizing, I was making sure because we had the right number of players, like I'd either add somebody, and everybody... It also kind of depends on the gear that you get.
It's also fun as a player, too, there's multiple threats, and we can't all stand around the BBEG.
Right, and so I was maximizing a lot of things about it or adding an extra person because I wanted it to be more difficult. I wanted that threat of failure to exist in my stuff. Not everything. You run into 2 guys on the road. I don't want that to feel like you're all going to lose there, but...
There have to be non-lethal encounters.
Yes, there has to be some, but in that module as well, it really does lean into like, hey, your characters are... Your players are going to be at this level whenever they get here, most likely. This could be a TPK situation, and it's just got these warnings across the book, like, hey, watch out, watch out, watch out. So for me, it was more about making things dangerous. And so I would go a little bit above that. So I'd say, okay, my players are level 3, I'm going to throw an extra couple dudes at them.
You know, this is... And we're not here to burn anyone, but sometimes it's fun to see the differing opinions people will have. Yep. And today, I think we talked about this morning, about one of the spiciest hot takes I've seen in a while for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, which was that every encounter in D&D or in any TTRPG should be deadly. And I don't mean deadly the rating and challenge rating, in the challenge rating system, but I mean they meant deadly in the sense that every encounter should have a high probability that a player dies or is fully expended of their resources. Sounds exhausting.
It does. Being the kind of DM that I am versus you in that regard, I would say, yes, more of mine were I was trying to get you to use your resources because I really wanted to start throwing more stuff at you, or more frequent, smaller encounters to like, oh, you're going to get into a couple fights today because you're in a bad neighborhood or whatever it is. But if I'm going to run like... I ran that adventuring camp. I'm not going to have that be deadly dangerous encounters because it didn't make sense.
Well, you can make... So, just to clarify, you can make encounters that are designed to burn out resources without... The deadliness, really, I think what the point was that most players should be nearly at 0 hit points. And you can do that in a non-lethal setting. It's the party has a chance of failure.
Yeah, I don't know how much I like it, because even though I'm saying, yeah, I'm really into let's amp up the difficulty and really make you have to plan or think or strategize.
I love that.
I do too, but I don't want the players to feel like it's a slog. That's my main concern in anything, is that I don't want my players to be tired. Again, throw them a bone every once in a while. Give them some wins. Give them some easier fights, or fights that look hard, but they are whatever's going on behind the screen with what the stat blocks are, what their actual abilities are. Because, if you can trick your players into thinking a fight's going to be harder than it is.
This is sort of the Fallout problem of encounter balance.
Yeah.
For those of you who may have played several of the Bethesda games, these open world RPGs, great stories, really fun to play, but sometimes there are level adjustments based on zones. So you'll travel around, and strangely, the random bandits you're encountering on the road, they took 4 hits for you to kill at the start of the game, and maybe 2/3 of the game they're dressed different, but you're taking about 4 hits to kill the same person. Yep. And that I do think can take take a bit away from the idea of you being powerful or significant. And so I like having, there are things much stronger and much weaker. I don't want, for example, taking the bullet. I wouldn't want the bullet to later be something, you're going to face a bullet at level 17, let's say.
Yeah.
I don't want a normal bullet that you found randomly underground to be as harsh, to one-shot Silas.
Right, and I think that also would be like, later on in a campaign, if you come across one singular bullet and you can't do anything but fight it, leave the wizard alone with the dagger and walk off. Because, like, there's levels of... my point being that there's levels of, like, these creatures from earlier on in campaigns, you know, you kind of outgrow them as you level, unless they're in groups.
And that's really the key right there.
Yeah.
You can face a herd of bullets, a pod of bullets.
Whatever their name is for a group. But I would rather...
A rumble of bullets.
But I would rather, to put the fear of the DM in my players, I would rather give them an encounter that looks like it's going to be hard, and it'd be slightly easier so that they get that win.
How do we feel about legendary actions in general?
I love them. I love them. I'm sorry.
It might be one of my favorite parts of 5th edition.
It fixes the problem, again, that we talked about with the action economy, where every player is going to have the ability to use a movement, action, bonus action, and reaction. And so if you've got 5 players, you do the math there, like you're getting to the point where early in campaigns even, low level, a lot of things you can't just always throw one monster at them or 2 people at them.
I'm a huge fan even of the most basic legendary action, which I would say is more common than some of the others, is a simple... There's 2 sort of legendary actions I'm a big fan of giving to a creature. A solitary attack, so they hit with some appendage or weapon, or they move.
Yes.
And sometimes those are the same thing, they're combined.
I've liked when we faced creatures that can do a disengage and move half speed or something like that. I've liked that as well. Because that does also...
Relocate, I think, is a lot of the times used.
Players have attacks of opportunity they can take. If you've got somebody who's standing it with them and they've been getting wailed on and then they disengage and move and give themselves a little bit of space, it may come back to their turn before another player can get up close with them.
It also, once players see that, it also gives more, it allows for some more player decision. If you know that it can relocate, which means that, because there should be something in the fiction, it means it's a very fast, swift-moving creature. Perhaps it's not the best idea for you all to commit to one specific location. Maybe you keep a melee person over near the rear line archer. And I think those sort of in-combat decisions are fun. Also, gotta say, any fight where the players are moving, or any fight where the players stop moving after round 1, I think is a little less fun.
Yeah.
It's tough.
I would add, though, that it makes it, again, my thing about, like, I want my players to feel like they've really gotten a win whenever they finish an encounter. Giving something legendary actions, you saw our faces at the table.
Oh,
yes. We were terrified because we know what we as players who've played with you know what's going to happen when there's a legendary action. Every single round of combat, this thing's going to do things not on its turn.
And it only had it had 2 options, but it could only use 1 ability a round. And so it was way weaker than fighting 2 bullets.
Yeah.
Considerably weaker.
But it gives us that oh no feeling that we defeated it, and like say
the bad TikTok song.
Yeah. the oh no. But we were worried. We were really concerned.
Speaking of concern.
Oh no.
No, it's not that bad.
Okay.
There was a moment where I referenced the rushing water underground, and I think you had a large problem with that. Is moving water really that big of a problem for you? Are you not a fan of a slip and slide?
To all my players out there who may be at a table and the DM says the words running water, don't go near the water. Don't get into the water. Do your best to avoid the water.
Come on in, the water's great.
The water is not great. The water is not fine.
Especially if you're in heavy armor, I'm all for it.
Yeah, please don't get into the water if you have heavy armor on. It's terrifying because that's another situation where, okay, you push us off of a cliff, right?
This was your first taste. A lot of this bullet encounter, kind of peeking behind the screen, a lot of this was meant to just show a small smattering of things to come. So you've seen, it was basically a 5-foot square with running water in it, and its failed case was as soft as it could be. It restrained a player because he tripped into it, essentially.
Right, but I don't like to not be able to move.
Oh, yes.
Oh, no.
Stormio, my man.
That's amazing.
Sewers are great. They limit
love
movement.
sewers. I love
You can mess with a lot of times with how players interact. So for those of you who may be watching this later, let me add this here. Stormio mentions our party is currently running in the realm of the dead, going through sewers filled with running water.
Yep.
I like how so sometimes it's good to have skill checks that can fail in an interesting way. Not necessarily lying to your players, but with a sewer or an enclosed space, it's very easy to have, oh, this perception check was failed. Maybe you heard an enemy, but you mistook which which pathway it's coming from.
Yep.
Sewers are a great place to do, have kind of, encounters that'll keep your players on edge.
Yeah, I love everything that we've done in sewers, but
The new sewer terrain.
with the water, you either drown or you get swept away.
If it's moving 30 feet per round, like that's the low ball of, if it's going to move you at all, that's probably the lowest you'll do.
And if you don't have a strength score to speak of, now your chances of surviving this are even worse. And if you do have a strength score to speak of, there's a very high likelihood you're wearing heavier armor.
And now, unlike certain other systems where there's an idea called armor check penalty,
Yep.
5th edition doesn't have that per se. Though, oftentimes in rushing water, you'll be calling for athletics checks. And depending on your DM, depending on how everything is being ruled, it can be a difficult thing to be moving through that water. I wouldn't want to get dropped into a river with plate on.
No.
I would prefer to not do that.
I would like to not get dropped into a body of water ever again. That would be really great.
So, the bullet.
Yeah.
You all paid a resident leather worker to actually carve and give you that hide. And we kind of talked about this. Now, this is all in the realm of homebrew, but you removed its plate and you removed its hide, though the hide was in 2 pieces due to some behind-the-scene rolling. It's quite a bit of coin.
Yes. I am excited.
Now, there's some splits in DMs here. How do you feel about, at least, not, as long as they're not doing it too often, this sort of looting magical creatures for their reagents?
You know that I like it because you let me do it a lot. You let us do it a lot before, and so I like it. I think it's fun.
The breastplate you created in your last campaign was comprised of
Green dragon on the front.
It was the black scale from the underside of a green dragon. It was white protanium, which is a magic metal in our setting. It was composed of, I believe you had mithril fasteners and a Jin's cloth for the reinforced
little
shoulders.
straps that would show me what the weather was like on the surface. Yeah, really great.
Not all of those had mechanical benefits.
I mean, there was no benefit to me looking and being like, I'm underground right now, but it's cloudy outside today. Like, that wasn't a mechanical benefit necessarily. Or mostly for me, I used it to see, am I going to get struck by lightning or not today?
Yes, you did get very worried about the fact that I kept hitting you with lightning bolts.
Yes, because I was bad at avoiding those.
I have the gold values for the bullet items you have, and this is a little preview for what you'll be hearing about next week, and I'm kind of excited.
Okay.
So, the bullet, the metal casing, is worth 400 gold pieces.
That's so many spells.
And each piece of the hide that you received are worth 125 gold pieces.
That's amazing.
And these values might sound considered incredibly high given the coin that you earned, but this was sort of this, again, optional mini boss, but also this is sort of the end of this kind of adventure you had here in Walnut Hill.
Yeah.
You're now heading over to Galavon, heading over to the capital, and now in your cart you either have this big payload to sell in the big city, or perhaps you'll start investing to craft some sort of armor out of this. And that would be a lot of money.
It would be a lot of money. I like the ability I like working with the DM, creating new magical items, creating new things. But sometimes I also just want to get rid of all of the junk and be like, I just want the gold for now. Like, I'll figure out what I want to spend it on later.
For example, you had that ring last session. You could choose to wear it, or you could choose to turn that into 13 gold pieces.
I could turn it into 13 gold pieces, which is like a quarter-ish of a spell.
You'll probably be selling the plate armor you found last session.
Yeah, probably. I don't see that we're going to be able to fit anybody in halfling plate.
It's used, it's smaller size, so it's not going to be it's going to be hundreds of gold.
Right.
But it's not going to be worth that full. It's either 16 or 1800 gold in the PHB, or the in the PHB for plate armor. But it's going to be a good chunk of change in your pockets.
Y'all, I wanted to add this real quick.
Oh no.
Playing a wizard is expensive. But you have
Give
to
your wizard gold.
You have to pay money to learn new spells. I'm playing an abjuration wizard, and all of their spells require basically monetary cost of materials. So they're not the ones you can kind of like.
Should we explain how this works?
Sure, let's go.
Let's get some nerd corner going on here before
this.
we get to the rule corner.
So what it is there are verbal, somatic, and material components for spell casting. Verbal being the words you say, somatic being the things you do with your hands, and material. So like, for example, fireball, you use some bat guano. And for other spells, maybe sleep, you do a little bit of fleece or whatever. So there's different things, or sand. It's fine sand. So you do. The fact that I know these things is actually kind of distressing.
Good. I am all for you learning your components.
But the cost of material components can be like the little ones that don't have a cost associated with them in the spell text. You can use a spell casting component of some kind. Oh no.
She had both of her front paws fully underneath the door.
You can like say, okay, I have a component pouch that's got these things in it, or I use a wand. But if the material has in it, for example, a pearl worth 100 gold pieces, then you have to actually procure the pearl, spend the gold to get the pearl.
This actually was relevant for Gwynwyn,
Yes.
who was requiring something for a component for identify.
Specifically identifies for that pearl. And then there's also arcane lock, I believe, is I think it's 25 or 50.
I believe it's powdered gold.
Powdered gold.
Yes.
So I think it's 25 powdered gold that is consumed by the spell.
And so this is all to say that in addition to the cost of actually scribing or copying your spells in your spell books, wizards are one of the only classes with an actual rules as written gold sink in them.
Yes.
The closest I would say is strength-based marshals have that sort of inborn one day they want plate armor, and so there's that.
That was expensive.
Is it 50 gold per level?
50 gold per level, and then I believe 2 hours per level.
I believe it's an hour per level, but it's 50 or 100, and
It's 50 per level.
And so you have this idea that even if we compare to plate armor, if your rules is written, your DM does not have to use magical items, and as such, it could be the case where the price of plate armor is dwarfed by the amount of spell scrolls. If you play in a campaign where you have opposing wizards, those spell scrolls being copied over into your spell book, same exact idea as using a spell scroll, will take that chunk of gold. And so if you got a wizard at your table and you haven't sat down to think about how much gold you're offering, I think it's really something that you can do. It'll improve your wizard's time at the table for sure. You don't have to give them everything.
Right.
Absolutely.
But because again, with everything, there's going to be restrictions on what you can do. And if I just had unlimited gold only for scribing spells, like a pouch that's only you can spend on.
Why would you play a sorcerer?
Why would I play a sorcerer? Because wizards. So there is that restriction that makes wizards, kind of bring back down into everybody else's realm.
Right. There has to be a limit, and it's a difficult balance. It took. Now, in our last campaign, we did have a wizard, and that wizard, near 18th or 19th level, spent truly tens of thousands of gold and obtained most spells under, I believe it was 6th or 7th level.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a personal project of hers, and that wizard, very powerful, very wealthy from all of the things you've done in your campaign.
Yeah. But it is hard. And again, some spells you can keep reusing your costed material. So augury, you get your bone dice and you keep rolling them for things, or you got your crystal ball. Identify you by your pearl.
Others consume the
Others
reagent.
consume it. So any resurrection magic is going to consume the diamond that you use for it. And that too, again, now clerics, we always think the clerics are not just heal bots. That's not all that they do. But a lot of stuff on the cleric spell list as well does have material costs associated with it.
Oh, I think we'll have to have that. I think the diamond discussion is going to be something big we're going to have. That might be in session.
I think that'd be good in session, but I also think kind of talking about, again, because everybody does their resurrection magic a little bit differently. Some people do it completely by the book, so like you can just go buy diamonds and you can go and do it. They may have the rituals around it, so you've got to do other things for success or failure, and each table may be just a little bit different. So us kind of sitting down and really explaining our resurrection rules at some point, I think would be a good idea.
So I
I've
actually
had to do it a few times.
I have some questions from the audience, not from today's chat, but actually from since our last footnotes that I'd love to talk about. Some of these are coming from MTL here, who wanted to know. So we've switched from playing a home game, no one ever saw it, no one knew of all of your failed rolls,
I told a lot of people about my failed rolls.
to a streamed game. And they're kind of curious now, this was both as for our players and as a dungeon master, what the change has been like. And now that I think we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but now that we're 8 sessions in, we've had level ups, we've had continuing storylines, we've had a completed story. Sulo's quest is now over. I'm kind of curious how, as a player, how different does it feel? Is it the same? Is it completely transformative?
I actually have an example of that from the last 2 sessions.
Oh, okay.
It is not necessarily the same. I'm not going to say it's worse. It was hard to get used to all of this, right?
Yeah, as you
Now
can
I'm sitting
see,
here,
we have a few of these cameras around the room.
yeah, we've got cameras, we've got mics, so it's a little bit different playing and knowing that there are people watching you, and you can kind of like eventually have been able to kind of be like, okay, I'm playing, like, you know, it's okay. But for example, we had this misunderstanding that had happened with myself and with Gwen, where we were doing things and other people were like, either you're torturing people or you're murdering people. Like, what are you guys doing?
I want to be a little more clear on this on this part. So there were 2 similar issues that were happening at once. For Gwynwyn, Amanda's player character, Gwynwyn was using attacks and causing lethal damage.
Yep.
Now, that is due to the fact that range attacks, rules as written, don't allow for non-lethal. But as Amanda would express in the last session, the reason behind it was that Gwynwyn was defending people, or was attacking people who were trying to kill Silas.
Yes.
And so the party was reading it more as bloodlust, that Gwyn was violent.
And then on my behalf, I was trying to question people, and everybody's like, oh, so you're going to torture people now? Like, well, you know, we're going to do, like, physical aggression towards them, try to get information from them. And I was like, no, I'm just trying to pay for their knowledge. If they don't want to share it, then, like, whatever. But I don't want to threaten with violence necessarily.
It's interesting, because that whole players capture an NPC and immediately go into, you know, pulling off fingernails.
Yeah,
that was never really what our table did.
Right. We had a weird thing that we did. Can I tell them about the weird thing we did in our last campaign?
Is it the shovel?
It's the shovels.
Okay. I'm going to preface the shovels. In nearly all instances, our players were real big goody two-shoes.
Yes.
But in one instance, there was a kidnapped child.
We did the shovel thing like 5 or 6 times. We kept doing the shovel thing. We even made sure to tell you that we went and bought a shovel, like, and made sure one of us was carrying it, because instead of doing any sort of physical torture, we were doing psychological torture because we were bad people, and we would hand people shovels and tell them to dig, and that got people talking, right? So we were being very evil in that moment a couple times, but what my character was trying to say as well was, hey, I'm not trying to torture people, I'm not trying to do these, like, I'm just trying to ask questions. I mean, it's obviously threatening because now they're in a position where they're not really able to defend themselves, but I'm not trying to kill these people. But if we were playing in a home game, Amanda and I would likely have had these conversations after the session and come back into it, and all of us would have just said this happened at some point, like, like we talked about it in character or whatever, maybe not for real.
Because we did. We actually, and this is very important, there was an in-game problem that was going on that was a miscommunication between players. Yeah. And so we did what we've always done, where we talk about the sessions and make sure everyone's having a good time. And the two of you both expressed that there was a bit of confusion because everyone else in the party had perceived you one way and you had been trying to come off as another.
And if it were just a home game, that would have been the end of it. However, because it's now a streamed game, these private conversations that we have after the sessions or in between sessions aren't going to be expressed.
Right, the beach episode has to be on camera.
Right, the beach episode has to be on camera. So these explanations had to be on camera because for both Amanda and I would say a large part of it is, hey, I know that if everybody at the table is misunderstanding what I'm doing, then everybody watching is misunderstanding what I'm doing. I did see a chat comment that says, oh, that got dark whenever I started questioning the guy.
It does happen.
I was like, oh no, I'm really coming off the wrong way. And like other people are playing into the thing that I'm not communicating well.
And hey,
so
Unfortunately,
later.
you're gonna end up capturing another one of my my NPCs at some point.
Probably, and hopefully in the future we stay more in line with the let's question without threatening violence or doing violence to people. I don't think that in every situation every party is going to make the right decisions in character, meaning the good decision in character. But yeah, I think it's important being on stream. That's, I think, the biggest gameplay change. Oh, also table talk. We're trying to get better at that.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah.
I'll have to say, in a lot of ways, that things haven't changed very much on my end.
That's a big change for me.
I genuinely, it's such a, the biggest difference I've had is a very minor one, but it's one that I'm still working on, which is when a mistake is made while dungeon mastering. Not a rules mistake. Rules mistakes can always be addressed and we can fix it in the future times. But when there is a narrative mistake. So to give an example would be, I say the wrong name for a character. Perhaps I mispronounce it, or, you know, nine forbid, I say actually the name of a different character. And this actually happened very recently, where I used an incorrect first name for someone. And so that can be a little bit hard. Right now, the kind of way that I'm smoothing this over is that, I noticed I made a mistake when I'm watching the VOD later. I'll, the next session, make sure to reference the character correctly and say that more than once. I let the players know that I made the mistake, and then we simply move on from there. The players certainly get the names wrong sometimes. It happens on occasion.
I can't spell anything.
No one has ever known how to spell the name of an NPC.
We have a very, very beloved NPC from the previous campaign. We traveled with, they were part of our party. They were an NPC in the party. We had control of her during combats. I loved to run her because she was fun.
Can we mention? Oh, we can.
Yeah.
Now, Clella, they're playing Ililia Arendral, who is the daughter of the NPC you're talking about.
Yes. And I love to play her. And I even had a little sheet. Like, you gave me a little sheet that had all of her stuff on it.
And her name.
But yet every time I wrote it down in my notes, for over a year, I spelled it incorrectly. Very wrong. Very, very wrong. I cannot spell anyway, and then you add fantasy names on top of it. So there will be
I'm a big fan of AE being used in places.
We do that a little bit. So I would love to just get all of the spellings, like, at the beginning when I meet somebody, because I will continue to reference them. So I frequently say, can you spell that? Or I just stare blankly until you do.
Kind of continue on from what I was asked online, there were some questions as to how we make stories to D4. What kind of tech is involved for this? And I think so the two of us really worked to get this whole studio set up. There was also a bunch of help from both your father for creating this table.
This beautiful table, my goodness. We should take more pictures of it, because I think that this is...
If they want to see pictures of this, where would they go, though? Where would we put pictures?
We would put pictures of this table on our Discord.
Come to our Discord!
Yeah, you do not have to be a subscriber.
It's free.
It's free to join. If you want to subscribe, there is one room right now active that is a private room, but for a little bit more behind the scenes stuff there. But we do post a lot of pictures, talk a lot, lots of memes, lots of making fun of Jake. Silas, sorry, not Jake.
Oh, no. We've addressed there is a strict rule against bullying on our Discord server.
Correct.
There is an exception for Jake.
You have to be a nice bully, though. You can't be a mean bully.
You have to be a nice bully.
Right.
Nice bullying is,
right.
Well, let's be careful.
You're such a nerd. Your hair looks so good today. That kind of thing, right?
So, here's kind of the long and short of what we do here on Stories of D4, how we make everything kind of function. First things first, you're seeing me here right now on one of these cameras. We use Logitech, C922s. These are USB webcams. Now, because we have several of them, I did have to make a couple changes to my machine to run this many USB-based devices. For lighting, we have a pair of LED panels, and since we're in an apartment bedroom that's been converted into this studio, having LED panels kind of reduces that heat load, which is super important.
We do end up dropping the temp on Fridays, but we also have the lights that aren't going to give up a lot of heat.
For microphones, all of our players are on Shure SM48s. They're really great. They work less well when you're off mic, but you can whisper into them slightly and they work just fine.
Yeah, I love these things.
We're a big fan.
These were a great find.
And additionally, since I am the DM, I have there were a couple of reasons why I didn't go with this mic for my station. I am using an Audio-Technica AT875, and don't worry, for those of you who are just here for D&D talk, we're almost done with the tech stuff.
We might put a little thing in our about section that's got our tech in it.
We can absolutely add in what we're using for this. And the reason we're using that shotgun mic, that Audio-Technica mic for the DM is I have to be able to move a little bit. You've been watching me here for the past bit of time. You'll see I'm constantly wiggling my hands over here.
Yeah, you're constantly leaning forward and talking, moving, and like your posture changes a lot during sessions. And so
I have to sometimes really do a bunch of big body language things to shift NPCs.
And I know with me moving back and forth a little bit, I may get picked up better or worse depending on where I'm at. So you having the shotgun mic just into your area, overhead boom.
There is one other reason that we're using that Now, I have an overhead boom on the DM station. You can't actually see the microphone itself above me. The other reason that we're not using that is that using the Audio-Technica microphone for all of us is that to do so, we would need some sort of rig that would be mounted to the ceiling. Here in an apartment, not terribly possible.
No, but I was coming up with a few really, really bad ideas on how to do it. So if you want for me to...
You have the best bad ideas.
I mean, this involves a lot of clamps. A lot of clamping.
And for the actual software itself, we are currently, what you're seeing right now is a feed from OBS, not Streamlabs OBS, and we are using a recent addition to this is Touch Portal, which I can you're not gonna be able to see it too well, but I have an array of buttons here on my phone that will allow me to actually control what scene you're seeing. And that's most of the stack here. We'll have more information in a post a little bit later.
We didn't mention my favorite thing. The Zoom PA pod track. Mixer. Our mixer I love.
We have a mixer. We're capped on microphones, having 6 microphones on this system. It's absolutely fantastic. And as we've been learning behind the scenes, it's absolutely when we're not using live streams and we're doing something, let's say, pre-recorded, it's excellent for having individual audio streams that we can adjust as needed.
So if one of your players continues to open a chip bag and rustle it in front of the microphone, you can just mute them for a little bit.
Right.
Easier to edit out sounds or fix. Maybe somebody got quiet for a minute. You can move them around. I love it.
When we're doing a live stream, all of those feeds are mixed. They're mixed live, and so we adjust sort of as a master, as well as we have Alex, who's behind the scenes, adjusting those levels as necessary. But when it comes to pre-recorded things, we are able to kind of mix and edit those in post. Yep. Which the Else campaign is all done live at the moment. We have no plans to change that in the near future, but MTL, I hope that kind of answers your questions. And I did have one other question from a personal friend of mine, which is both for me and for other players here, which is where we get inspiration for names for locations and players and such.
Okay, are you asking me first?
I know the story, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit.
For this character in specific?
For his meaning.
Okay, so I have a couple problems. Number one is that the Callister family was mentioned previously, and I had a little section in my notes about them, and I thought they sounded really cool. So I wanted to make a Callister specifically because he said this name, said what they do. I thought it was neat. But then a lot of my character names end up being either specifically from Greek mythology or loosely based on, so like maybe changing some spellings to make it a little bit more fantastical. But that's not a lot of my names were like that. But my first character and my second character, so both of my dwarves, the cleric and then the bard that I played, I went into the PHB and I went down the list of female dwarf names, and I picked the ones that I thought sounded cool.
I think that what you just referenced, every race in the PHB and in other books has a name section. It's very valuable. If you like the tone, the different sounds they've chosen, I think it's a very useful tool.
And I would say also, again, I know I keep bringing up Curse of Straw, but that's my DMing experience. I know that in that module, so I would assume in others as well, they have tables of names, first and last names that you can use so that the NPCs you put into the setting have names that match the flavor. Yeah, match the flavor. You're kind of Eastern European naming conventions. I don't know. I just got my cardinal direction.
We're from Texas, so we are not expected to know which direction things are coming from.
great.
Yeehaw.
But I do say that I know for sure that that's in Curse of Strahd. I haven't looked through other modules before to see if they're in there as well, but that can really be helpful for somebody, especially if you're a new DM, to just have like a list of, okay, this is what Wizards of the Coast or whatever other publisher you're using, but what they say is going to work in the setting, kind of make it all feel like one cohesive. And I know for Pathfinder as well, they have like full setting guides.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I love their setting guides.
Now, in our setting, there are several regions that have sort of real world analogs. It's not, I guess, there's not a lot of them, but when I have those, what I'll often will do is in some way I'll have a region that's reflecting somewhere in the real world. So we have one example is Spiti, which is a sort of Greco-Roman, well, it's Greek, it's a Greek-inspired region. A lot of the names are based on common Greek names throughout history. A lot of the actual major players there are based off of the various Greek myths. I also like how you used Ismini, you have Ismini from there, found that it was very useful.
Oh yeah, Ismini is, you know the story of Oedipus? Got 2 daughters, Antigone and Ismene. Yeah, that's where that came from. I'm gonna completely show my hand right now, and I did just pick the name of one of Oedipus' daughters. So, whoops! Enjoy that.
I'm a big fan. We talked before the.
Yeah, sorry, Jake. You know the secret now. I am named after one of the 2 daughters, and I think it's actually pretty interesting for me. Sorry, I'll let you go on.
No, you're fine.
Using the stories of these characters also was a great place for me to start, because I like to build out my character personality before sometimes even all of the, all the actual mechanics are built. And so I kind of used those stories and was like,
Ismini didn't have a name for a long time.
Ismini did not have a name for a while. I had to find the perfect name.
That's genuinely something that happens for me as well. The whole delay of name. You met this last session. This is the first time you've met a Volcar in any campaign. I've never given you an example of one of them previously, but that character, Sophia, she actually didn't have a name until very recently, despite being the first NPC that I wrote while doing my my campaign prep for this.
Wow, that I did not know. That's exciting.
And sometimes the character names will come from specific sources. I have previously used Magic the Gathering, has a lot of really interesting names they've used for different characters. And what's great is that also another Wizards of the Coast property is that when they're from the same plane, they'll often have style guides or they'll have consistent theming.
Yep.
We have several big heroes from Issel, from the Northern Kingdoms, that all have names that are from Innistrad, one of the planes of Magic the Gathering. Thalia and Audric being 2 notable ones.
I also like baby name lists. I love baby name lists. They're great because it's just like, here's 100 popular names in insert time period, insert decade, insert location. Fantastic if you're really looking for something very consistent. And so maybe you find something you like for first name and you go look at the last name, or you fall in love with the last name, and then you can go to either a generator or one of these massive lists, because I sit there and like make sure that the name sounds good together for a while. So having 100 names to choose from, I like that.
Are you ready for me to ruin a character?
I'm ready for you to ruin a lot of characters.
I believe it was on the writing prompts subreddit where people were writing variations. They were like writing different variations of other characters they've met, going through the same story. How do things change? There was a gender bent Randall Thor named Rada.
Did you name?
Well,
are you
Merlin? The horses in the Cavalberry caravan are supposed to be named after. Oh no! What did Jake say?
Jake.
Oh no.
Elon Musk's son's name is not up for grabs.
No, it is not. You were correct. But so what I chose, I often will do things that are related to having similar names. You probably have noticed by now, but all of the town guards that I use will have names that reference Star Wars, or sometimes other science fantasy, but generally Star Wars. And different kingdoms have different etymological origins. I'm a big prep nerd.
Yes.
I took all of the languages and figured out which ones shared a script. And so there's one group of languages that share a script. And so all the different nations from them use shared roots from our language. So the big example is that Draconic is Latin. So my names for most of my dragons previously have been Draconic, except from those from Barbada. And why that is something we'll have to worry about another time.
Maybe a different day. But yeah, I thought maybe we'd also talk about one other naming convention you use.
Names? What? What other naming convention do I use? No, I don't. You're right. I cannot read eyebrow. I'm actually not proficient.
How do you name your guards?
Oh, I was just saying Star Wars.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I completely blanked. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's on me.
I
thought you were talking about dragons.
Before that was Star Wars.
Okay.
Anywho, we're running out of time, and I realize I haven't gotten to my rules corner yet. I'm cold and scared, and I really want to sit in my corner.
Let's go to your corner then.
Let's go to the rules corner. I have a fiddle. Or rather, I have a rule to fiddle with.
Okay.
5th edition is incredibly great at allowing you to quickly build character concepts, allowing you to easily play them and execute them during session time. I have found a build that I'm not happy with how 5th edition can implement it with. You have a fighter.
Okay.
You're an 11th level fighter. You want to shoot arrows. You can shoot 3 arrows. You can shoot 6 arrows once.
Okay. Great.
You can't throw 3 daggers in a turn. So, typically, as part of your turn, you may draw or stow a single weapon. Now, this might involve you dropping a weapon and drawing a weapon at the same time. So one weapon ends up on the ground because you can drop weapons as a free action. There's even a feat known as Dual Wielder, which allows you to draw or stow 2 weapons when you normally can only do 1.
Okay.
But 11th level fighters have 3 attacks.
Right.
Now, if you're holding 2 daggers at the start as an 11th level fighter, and you have the Dual Wielder feat, you throw 2, draw 1, draw a second, throw 1, you end your turn with 1 in your hand. The next turn, you do the same thing, you're down to 0. I'm sorry to tell you, without homebrew, you can't consistently throw... If you have a 3-round combat, you can't triple throw daggers without magic items or homebrew. I'm so sorry. Our typical example for go-to of a specialization is being a knife juggler is what we talk about.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, due to the way that drawing and stowing a weapon works, this is not an option. Now, I think this is something that's very easy if you have a player who wants to do so.
3 daggers.
Now, rules is written as part of attacking with a bow is actually drawing this. The thrown weapons don't have this. That is part of the action. Mm-hmm. Thrown weapons don't have this, and I do think it's a very easy small piece. I wouldn't even say duct tape. It's a Scotch tape. It's a painter's tape solution to simply allow for specifically thrown weapons to function as per weapons with the ammunition property, which allow you to fire them more than once. It allows you to draw them as part of that attack. And I think that's how we'd handle it. You know, this would be something that I was looking for an interesting rule and I was fiddling with, but absolutely something I did not expect to be incapable of doing using the basic rules.
Yeah.
And we're wrong. Come tell us in the Discord.
Yeah, please tell us if we're wrong, because now I want to figure out if I can break this somehow.
I have one more rules. Before I go and meditate in my rules corner for another week, only to emerge like a beautiful butterfly on Friday for our next session, I want to talk about how a house rule so common it feels like it's an actual basic rule.
Okay.
I'm going to describe a turn and I want to see if you can catch it.
Okay.
It's on my turn. I am looking around because one of my enemies is ducked behind some of the crates nearby and I'm not sure where they are. I quickly make a perception check.
That's an action.
It's an action. The spot action is I would say it is the...
most ignored. One of the most ignored.
For sure.
For sure up there.
One of the most ignored forms of action. To perceive or to investigate in a section is supposed to be an action. And now this doesn't affect nearly any table. However, there is a subclass that I think is very cool, known as the Inquisitive for Rogue, which gains the ability to make perception checks as a bonus action. If you, and it's a little more specific than that, but if you are playing at a table with this Inquisitive, playing with this house rule sort of blanks one of their features.
Yeah, that's actually true. I get that. At our table, we've got the checks that use your eyes or your brain.
You can make one.
You can make one. So you can try to remember something, you can try to look for something, you can try to listen for something, but you can't can I, I don't know, can I tumble a tree? I don't know. But these more physical checks we don't usually do, but we've had a lot of these.
You typically at our table you can perform a physical check. I'm going to try to leap over something. I'm going to try to do something specific, and that may or may not cost an action. It'll depend.
Yeah.
But those mental checks, the first one's free, but after that I might start charging.
Yeah.
And with the feature itself is called Eye for Detail, which is something I highly recommend it. The Inquisitive subclass, other than this feature, is really fun. Has some great things going on in combat. I'd love to see one at a table sometime.
I don't know if I've ever played where...
You've never made a spot check.
Right. I don't think I've ever played where that was a thing.
We haven't... It's actually something that we learned about after we stopped playing Adventurers League.
Yeah.
And so even there, where the rules are pretty heavily moderated and with very talented DMs who put in the time to help out the community, it's just not something that typically comes up.
Yeah. I haven't really...
And I think it's for the better. I'll admit, I do think this is something that in a lot of cases improves the game. Now...
I guess, okay, I will make a counterpoint.
Ooh.
A round of combat is 6 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So say I'm going to fill up my 6 seconds. I'm going to run 35 feet. I'm going to swing with my weapon 2 times. I'm going to use a bonus action to, I don't know, cast Healing Word. And then...
Whoa. So you're a 5th level marshal, you're a wood elf, and you've got 1st level spellcasting. I'm living for this multi-class.
I'm working on it. I'm working on the idea right now as we talk. But you are doing all of these things, right? And you're also taking the time to check out your surroundings.
Sure.
I can see the argument as to why doing more than passive perception, which I would, again, figuring out why they chose to do this. Passive perception is you're just existing in the area, actively searching for something, actively trying to recall information past what you would know on a surface level. I can understand making that a check. I understand it.
No, it's absolutely, and that's you've actually hit the nail on the head with, if you're not using this house rule. If you're hearing this and you find out, no, this rule I wasn't aware of, and I want to be strict by the book. Which, hey, if that works for your table, go for it. I think the big thing is having a very strong grasp of how passive perception works.
Yeah.
As this really only comes, I would say this mostly comes up 9 times out of 10 with stealth checks. When you have an opponent using stealth.
Yes. That's an action to look for them.
And given that, I'm going to leave the players with those players who would like to hold the PHB as a holy tome above their heads. Mm-hmm. I want them to very carefully study the interaction between invisibility and the hide action. That is the homework I will leave our viewers with.
Now I need to go do that homework. You've given me homework.
I have homework every week. You all keep asking for more adventures. I gave you one. You want another?
Yeah, every Friday is we show up and we sit here at this table begging for something. Scraps.
Well,
or full meals. Give us something.
You know what? I'll take that homework and I will see you all next Friday. In addition, as a huge reminder, thank you so much for everyone who's here now. We'd love to have you join us on Halloween for our Halloween one-shot. We're thrilled, and we're really excited for you to meet our first guest player.
Yeah, it will be a pre-recorded, but it will go live at...
It'll be live at our normal time, 7 o'clock Central, and we hope to see you there. We'll see you next time on Stories to D4, everybody. Later! Good job, Coco.